Hi there, you can just see in the background a parachute with the guys turning up today for the Polaris Bushcraft Forage. Now, a few years ago I signed up to an online tree and plant masterclass, and the homework wood that I had to have was sort of southeast of here, sort of stone's throw away, so it'll be interesting to see all the forage stuff I found there and what we find here, see if it's the same or different. So I've got Graham Cooling here, who's going to lead today's forage. I'm just going to ask him a few questions. First of all, Graham, thank you for forming a bushcraft school only 20 minutes from my house. That's very kind of you, very
pleasure.
thoughtful. So basically, I'm just going to ask a few questions about your company to start with. I mean, I've called it Polaris Bushcraft, but you have a different name on your badge, don't you? So what do you actually know it as?
Polaris Wilderness Adventure is the official company name that I registered it under. Merely because for me bushcraft is a very wide subject. It encompasses a lot of things from the traditional craft things, bark working and that sort of stuff, to understanding nature and wild foods. But to a lot of people, bushcraft is lighting fires and perhaps, dare I say it, cooking marshmallows and maybe not much more. So that was the main reason for the company name being Wilderness Adventure, because it's more about just appreciating everything that we can do outdoors rather than any one specific thing. But that said, obviously I use Polaris Bushcraft as the website address.
Yeah, catchy name, I suppose.
Short and findable, yes.
Because you weren't in this wood in Hertfordshire initially. There's a new one for you, isn't it?
I had to start out. I mean, I've actually been here a while now. I'm surprised. We must be doing something wrong with our marketing that you haven't found us sooner, Austin.
Well, I think I had, and I had this brain fart and never followed it up because I thought, oh, Bayford, that's really close to me. And then suddenly it's been like possibly years.
Yeah, because we've been here since 2015.
It's doubly embarrassing.
We did used to do stuff at the Celtic Harmony.
Yes, just down the road.
Village up the road, which has 13 acres of woodland. So we ran a few courses there, but primarily started out using scout campsites.
One thing I did notice when I booked the foraging course, that you've got the Institute of Learning that you've done, but also the ethnobotany side of things. How did you come to do that? Was it just sort of a natural progression in your learning as a leader?
So I started going on bushcraft courses to formalise my learning around, I guess, 2008, something like that. And I did a level 3 advanced bushcraft course with Woodcraft School.
John Ryder.
With John, which really infused me to the point where I thought, okay, I want to do the year-long instructor qualification, which was brilliant, the level 4 Bushcraft Leadership Award. And in that, you cover about 40 species of trees and a similar number of plants, which I found really interesting, and it gave names to things I recognised but didn't necessarily know the names of, but it also made me appreciate how much more there is to learn. So I then ended up going and doing the practical ethnobotany course, which is a year-long course, so you follow everything right through the seasons.
That was with John again, yeah?
That was with John again, which I found really, really useful. And from there, you kind of in the position by the end of that course where you sort of need to take responsibility for your own learning to then push on beyond that.
So talking of journeys, obviously we're going to be starting out on the forage soon. What sort of estimate do you think you can put on the amount of things that we'll find potentially that could be consumed, either as a medicine or as a foodstuff?
Well, we've got 45 acres to wander around of the woodland, and then we're going to go out just out the edge of the woods so that we get some light, and on the edge of a little bit of grassland, because that'll offer us a few more species. But I did the walk 2 days ago, and I totalled up 76 species. So definitely want your notebook. But hopefully we won't overload people with information. And some of those things some of you guys will have seen before, may be familiar with, or maybe you're not familiar with, but nonetheless it's actually visually unfamiliar with that. I don't know what it is, but now by the end of the day I will do.
Because it's a balance, isn't it? Because someone like me, I'll just consume whatever you throw at me, but someone who's just come to see what it's like in the woods, they might just get totally overloaded.
I can remember the feeling of particularly identifying stuff from foliage, where after a few hours when you're learning, okay, it's all just green.
Yeah.
My head hurt. So you know, it's great if people want to take photographs and that sort of thing, just as an aid to remembering and take notes and stuff. But the main thing is to actually experience the plants rather than just have it. It's not about what you see; it's about what you touch.
Exactly,
taste,
a book on
feel,
YouTube can only
smell.
take you so far, can't it? Yeah.
You know, there's strong evidence that smells and textures are really important in memory generally. You know, you get that smell, and all of a sudden you're back in your childhood. If there's something from your childhood. And I think the same thing with this. If you can engage as many of your senses as possible, then it's all the better. Yeah. So we shall dig some stuff out of the ground. We shall browse on some foliage, and hopefully everybody will go away with a few more species that they're confident at identifying and consuming, or indeed identifying and not consuming. So within that 76 species, there'll be a couple of toxic ones in there, and there'll be a couple of things that are useful as medicines rather than foods, but for the most part, most of those are edible.
Brilliant. That's great, Graham. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
So that's the quick question answer over. We're heading out.
Through a lot of the woodland, we'll find this, which is anyone?
Honeysuckle.
Honeysuckle, yeah. Lonicera periclamenum. Great sounding. I won't tell you how I remember it, but it's a terrible visual image involving ancient Greek ladies at ports and all sorts. For us, it's the nectar of the flowers that we can use as a food. Okay, it produces its fragrance at night, not in the daytime. So it's really attracts moths at night. Therefore, it attracts bats. So it's a good place for watching for bats if there's lots of honeysuckle around. But the little trumpet flowers, we can actually pull them off, pull the stamen out, and then the liquid drops out the hole in the bottom like a little funnel into your mouth, and it's really quite sweet. Although you only get a tiny amount, but a nice little delicacy if you like. So this is Lords and Ladies. It's toxic, also known as cuckoo pine, produces a flower which then has a tall stamen coming out the middle of it like this, and it's called Lords and Ladies for one of two reasons. Either because it used to be used, it's high in starch, and it used to be used for starching ruffs in Tudor times, you know, when everybody looked like they had their head through a doily. Or it's called Lords and Ladies because the flower looks a little bit like the lips of a vagina with a willy sticking out. Nobody knows for sure which it is, but that's quite a distinctive flower, so you'd recognise it when you see it. Once the flower's gone, that then becomes a spike of appealing looking red berries, but not appealing because they're toxic. Okay, this is foxglove, Digitalis purpurea. It will produce big tall flower spikes about this high, with at least 75 individual trumpets on there, much loved by bees and insects. And when it's bigger, you're unlikely to confuse the leaves. Well, the leaves here have got quite a pointed tip. But if you look at this one here, can you see that looks quite a lot more rounded, okay? And what we don't want to do, because both are growing at the same time early in the year, we don't want to confuse this with primrose, okay? So primrose is edible. This is used for heart medicines, and it always confuses me. It's used for medicines that both deal with ventral fibrillation, where your heart is beating irregularly, incredibly fast, but it's also used to strengthen a weak heart rate. So the bottom line is, anything that's going to mess about with our heart rate, we don't want to be ingesting large quantities of that, okay? So the way to tell, if we look at the leaves of a foxglove, if I take a bigger one, but you can see it's the same on this small one that looks like a primrose. If we look at the veins coming out from the midrib, they come out, but then they point up towards the tip. They don't run straight out to the edge. Can you see that? They all curl upwards. Here we've got raspberries, okay? They are, I think, a lot more reliable than blackberries in terms of the flavour. So we can eat the fruit. We can also make a tea from the leaves. This was, in folk medicine, this was used to ease childbirth and bring on labour and that sort of thing. And in World War II, we'd moved well away from that by that point, and we were using modern medicines, and we had shortages. So the government actually ordered a study into raspberry leaf based on the folklore, and they found a chemical that actively targets the pelvic muscles. This is a toxic one to avoid, but it's useful to us because it's an ancient woodland indicator, and this is figwort down here. So this has a square stem, but we don't want to confuse it with any of the dead nettles. Scrophularia nodosa. Does not look immediately appealing, okay? But all thistles are edible. You can roast the roots. but the above ground parts are edible as well. Obviously you've just got to try and get through all of the spines, okay? So it's because I have such leathery old hands, you see. So this is wood avens. It will have a yellow flower, and its distinctive feature is the 3 leaves here and then the 2 little leaflets clasping the stem. So we can eat the roots of this. So this is last year's flower spikes from the pendulous sedge, or rather that top one was the flower, and then these, see how easily they came off, although they are incredibly small, as I said. They just come off really easily into your hand. So this is the pendulous sedge seeds. So you're not really going to mistake it for anything else anyway, with these seeds hanging down the way that they do. But the other distinctive feature is it's got a very triangular cross section. Concentrica Dardinia, the King Alfred cake. So this is really useful as a tinder fungus. Okay, grows on dead ash, typically more like this sort of size. This is a particularly big one, so I thought I'd just stop to mention it. Hazel, so a fantastic source of nuts if you can beat the squirrels to them, which is often unlikely. So the nuts obviously form in little clusters, but it seems that the squirrels can enjoy them really a little bit before we can. So this is dog violet, Viola raviniana, little heart-shaped leaves. They get a lot bigger than this, but these are the little heart-shaped leaves and this very pretty little flower. For anybody who remembers the sweets Parma violets, this is what the flavour comes from, but I think these taste much nicer than the sweets, which are overpowering and taste like eating a bowl of potpourri. This is Primula vulgaris, primrose. Around this part of Hertfordshire there's plenty of this about. In some places it is quite rare, so I suppose the general clue is if it's the only patch you've seen all day, you probably shouldn't be foraging it. In Welling Village there's an entire bank of it. It's really, you know, just thousands of them, and they're absolutely lovely when they come out into flower. So all of the above ground parts are edible. The flowers used to be sugared and covered in egg white and used for cake decorations, which, looking at them, you can understand why. So this is rowan, mountain ash is its other name. So we can see from this leaf it's got this pinnate leaf structure, which is to say that this whole thing is one leaf to botany. Okay, so similar to ash or elder. So it's called mountain ash because it grows happily at high altitude, and because of its appearance to ash, although it's in no way related. This is a sorbus. Ash is actually olive family. The wild service tree. I'll find the leaf to show you. So the leaves look a little bit like maple, quite unusual though, and these produce a brown fruit which used to be both collected and cut. So they'd cut a branch with all the fruit on it and take it and hang it up in shops and sell it by the handful. People also used to collect it and take it home, and the brown fruit is very sweet, but it needs to be exposed to a frost first, which really unlocks the sugars and essentially begins to almost start to break down, and that's when they become really sweet. So they were popular with children and were sold in shops a couple of hundred years ago.
So we're all heading back now because that's the walking part of the forage done. We're going to do a bit more around base camp, but not after a spot of lunch.
Alehead. With this, which they sort of look a little bit similar, don't they? Okay, so this is the yellow flowers here. This is lesser celandine. Actually the texture of the leaves is quite different. Yeah, this is more shiny, this is more kind of matte and softer, and this is actually much more crenellated than that, but the overall shape is quite similar. So lesser celandine, ranunculus ficaria, buttercup family. All the above ground parts are toxic, however we can eat the roots once we've roasted them. So then they can just be dug up and then put in the embers of the fire and roasted and then munched. Although it may put you off when I tell you that its folk name is pilewort. Tiny little stem here. This a Pignuts Conopodium Magus, and this will have a tiny little thread that will go down from it, and it will never go in a straight line. But if we follow it down, we'll find a nut somewhere between, I guess, the size of that fingernail and sometimes really quite big, about this big.
Well, what do you know, the world's smallest pig nut.
This is the celandine that we saw earlier. So whilst we've got our digging sticks, let's find some hemorrhoids.
Lesser celandine hemorrhoids.
Bitter press. I brought some foliage to show you. It's up to you whether you want to try tasting it or not. It did come out of my flower bed, so some look a little bit neater than others, but this is a native. This is lady's mantle, Alchemilla species. So I'm reliably informed that this is really, really good for menstrual cramping and that sort of thing.
Up for trying a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that is good.
Thank you.
We've got our hemorrhoids. Oh yeah. Our pyrewort. So if I make up some little dough balls, do you guys want to have a go at tucking some of these in the edge of the embers and see if we can get them looking something like roasted, so that we can try these teeny little tubers?
I think it's cooked it well, because what does it bloody smell of? Getting the grip. That's a constant, isn't it? Yeah, a bit more.
Did I miss you before me?
Yeah, no, you didn't really.
Mind your fingers, we grab a
get
stalk.
one. Oh, you feel the heat.
Right, you need to
Thank you.
stop.
It's just sign that you don't actually get a physical share.
Right, here we have pickled ash keys and a bit of cheddar and a biscuit for them to go with. So stick on an appropriate amount for your own taste.
Thank you, thank you. Dandelion syrup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Nectar of the gods or something.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you.
Tastes quite sweet.
The colour on that.
Grow plants for oil like rapeseed. So I suppose we can have a quick photo.
Dandelion cake.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Oh, so that's the day over. Well worth attending.